Welcome to another episode of the Business of AI podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Daniel Callis from Beyla. So Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here.
And I'm looking forward to finding out more about Beyla and your background and what you're working on. But could you start off by telling us how did you end up where you are now? And then maybe sort of explain a bit about what Beyla does.
Yeah, no, they're happy to. And so you can tell by the grey hair, and you can't thankfully see the thinning bit at the back. I've spent sort of 25 plus years in big global financial services. And that really was through, in some ways, actually not by design. I didn't set out to be a banker, but I fell into banking I was actually training to do car design, actually, at the time. We got a summer job working for Chase Manhattan. So now JP Morgan, and I was the office boy, for a better term, giving out faxes and all sorts of other things, working in Chase Manhattan's global European processing centre in Bournemouth many years ago. So this was back in the late 1990s. And that for me was an amazing opportunity because it allowed me to see what was happening across in that sort of time, treasury services and payments, and I sort of absorbed that opportunity. Spent 2 years in the end with JP Morgan or Chase Manhattan, and then moved to Bank of America, where I spent 6 years, and then 16 years at HSBC. So effectively my career went from understanding operations around being a sort of an engineer mindset into having how I would help big global companies to manage their finances, how we could support their global aspirations into the growing. And I ended up in a position where I would have large teams of people spending quite a bit of time with CFOs, group treasurers, managing directors of big global enterprise companies. And we would bring in a big team. We'd do whiteboarding sessions. We'd do all sorts of sort of advisory work around how these big global companies can grow their business and build new products. And that sort of was great. I stepped back from that sort of the end of 2020 and I wanted to do something different. And I sort of realized where, if you think about sort of these were big global companies, so Fortune 500 names with big expertise within their own divisions, within their own teams. And as with all the banking, the attraction from banks is to work with large companies. If you're a small company and you go and work with a bank, then you get the basic services. And you can understand how that's worked through the economics of providing a service. And it was the right time where AI started to come forward and AI started to become something we could touch and feel. And I actually felt, okay, well, if I could take my enterprise experience and I can utilize AI as an intelligence layer to take that personal concept that we had initially and provide that through compute and intelligence at a platform level to small businesses, that's a huge opportunity. And that's really the genesis of where Beyla came from. So Beyla itself is, the name Beyla is the goddess of agriculture, pollination and bees. And we're building a collective hive mind of intelligence. And that hive mind, if you think about how in nature hives protect and grow their communities, we're working to protect and grow our communities through collective intelligence that we can capture and surface through the Beyla platform. So what we're effectively building for our customers is around the ability to get that same sort of enterprise experience that maybe sound like a Procter & Gamble would have with a big global bank, where you have understanding of expertise, but through a artificial intelligent platform that talks and sounds like a human. So what we're doing is we're taking the way that Beyla has been designed is that we're a conversational AI platform on one hand. So that's the communication part. How do you interface with it? And secondly, we're a connected orchestration layer where we connect into things like accounting systems, CRM systems, email, drives. And we look at sort of how do we then surface the information that a company has to them in a way that they understand that. And for me, SMEs are really important because the big challenge of being a small business is you can't afford the resources often that large companies have. You can't afford the systems and the understanding of what those large companies have. And you're running around spinning multiple different plates, trying to keep things running. And when you go to work with your partners and you go to a bank or you go to a provider and say, how can you help me? I want to grow my business. They'll generally ask you, great, what product do you want? And I'm not an expertise. I don't know what product I need. I need to grow my business. I want to buy this equipment. I need to purchase inventory. And that's where, for me, that big gap was always prevalent. So Beyla has really been built to solve. So how can I take that expertise that large banks and financial services providers provide to wealthy, large, well-resourced companies, and give that experience, a different experience, but the same type of approach to smaller growing companies that really need that assistance. And that, to me, is how AI is the conduit to do that, because it enables us to transform how the experience happens.
Yeah, I love so many of the ideas that you shared there, particularly this idea of that curation, because actually one of the things which many people would benefit from is having a curated understanding of their specific needs, because one, that's going to actually make it a lot more relevant to them. But also, two, it's going to enable them to get there quicker, whatever the result is. And the challenge we've had in the past is that we just haven't had the ability to have that curated approach, unless, as you pointed out, you're going to go down the route of something like private banking or very bespoke services, but by their nature, they have been very expensive. So effectively, what you're saying is that now we have these AI-powered tools. You can bring together not only the personalized approach based upon your own specific needs, but I love the way you bring in then the collective intelligence as well. So you're actually benefiting from the collective understanding of everyone's needs to plug into a system that then allows it to be very bespoke around the needs of the business.
Yeah, so, exactly. And I wanted to change the dynamic of how businesses look at growth, and certainly large enterprise businesses. Typically, if you work for a large financial services firm, or if you work for a large technology firm or a consulting firm, you're ultimately a salesperson. You're selling that bank or that provider's capabilities. And so effectively what you sell is what you have within your toolkit of products. And actually, for me, artificial intelligence at a sort of it creates a new paradigm of what is possible into what is a product. And that, to me, was really important, because I don't want to have Beyla selling solutions to customers that we build. What I want to understand is, okay, well, it allows me to understand what is your need. And then, okay, understanding your need allows me to connect you with solutions that fulfill that need. And that's been a key part of the genesis of how do we understand, and potentially we will have solutions that fulfill that need, and we'll process those and sort of monetize through that. But the whole focus is around sort of growing the opportunity with the customer. So our members, as we call them, if I can help your business to grow, then I grow with you. And that becomes an ecosystem opportunity then that we all benefit from together.
Yeah. How are you, can you give us an example of the type of challenge that a small business might have? I mean, I'm conscious that, with our business, where we have our financial director and we have our challenges that we've discussed at a board, and we're looking at everything from cash flow and profit, the standards of things. But is it that type of those kind of daily issues, or are there more strategic issues that you help with? And can you help bring some of those examples to life?
Yeah, no, happy to. So we're starting with financial services out as our core fundamental anchor part of sort of the genesis of Beyla. So it goes back to my experience, but also it's around making payments and receiving payments. Ultimately, is the fundamental part of every business. So if you can't pay or get paid, ultimately you're not running a business. So for us, that was a key area to sort of build into, and from there we can start to expand into different segments that touch that. And if you think about small and medium-sized businesses, and this is sort of reports that are done on a regular basis, generally about 40% to 46% to 50% of businesses don't have those dedicated financial expertise. So often you won't have a CFO or a finance director in a small business. You have people doing your finances that are part of a lot of other sort of hats they wear. And sort of 82% of businesses generally fail not due to profitability, but due to cash flow. And the reality is, running a business is hard. You're juggling different priorities. You don't necessarily have the tools available that some of those larger businesses do to see what's coming ahead, forecasting all of those platforms. And if you have those available, you probably don't know how to use them properly. So what we want to focus on is, how can we make that simpler? How can we provide a digital CFO type service through Beyla, where actually Beyla can talk to the business users, can share with them what their cash flows are looking like, what is coming down the track further out than maybe next week. It could be the next 3 months, could be the next 6 months, can look at what historical information is available just to the potentially pattern match, and really start to build a picture around for those users that really give a sort of a really high level and qualitative opportunity of, this is where you are today, this is where you want to be to get tomorrow, where are the gaps, where are the things that you really need to focus on, and where are the things you don't need to focus on.
Yeah, there's something really important there as well, for small businesses, which is, it's not just about simplifying it, it's about making it more accessible and available. Because when you're running a small business, you're thinking about a million things. And often you don't think about the finance issue, the cash flows you mentioned, until it's like a burning bridge, and then you have to kind of really sort of focus on it and think about it. What you're describing is not only simplifying that whole process, but also because of the pattern recognition you mentioned, you're able to predict things, you're actually able to make it more of the entrepreneur, the founder, the founding team's daily sort of dashboard, without them having to do a lot of the work. So it's almost like having that virtual financial director in your team without having to go and hire somebody to do that.
Exactly. And if you think about how we've moved into a world of convenience in some ways, so for many people, actually their phone is their banking dashboard now. So we've moved away from even sitting down in front of a computer and working on a big wide screen where we're seeing dashboards. You've got a sort of a phone in front of you that's got lots of apps. And the big challenge is understanding, actually, they're all slightly different here. So if I go on to Revolut, or if I go into Starling or Monzo or HSBC or Barclays, they're all pretty much the same as what they do. They give me a dashboard, they give me some graphs. But how do I actually use those? If I'm not if I was a business owner that wasn't in the financial services area, I've got to figure out how I use that. I've got to figure out what I need to do with that. And the challenge then is in terms of what is the art of the possible. I don't get to see that. And that's where we wanted Beyla to be dynamic. So every user effectively has a different type of approach. When they speak to Beyla and Beyla speaks back to them, they're getting tailored, customized insights and guidance around their specific business case. And that for us was important because it enables us, and through the ability to generate dashboards in real time, we're still providing information which is relevant and consistent, but it's tailored to Tim, or it's tailored to your finance director, it's tailored to somebody else that is based around your level of knowledge and understanding of that subject matter expertise.
Yeah, so that level of orchestration, I think, is really powerful, that you've got all of that going on behind the scenes. You mentioned before that sort of conversational front part, the sort of almost an agent who you can talk to, and talk to in natural language, and they can talk to you and explain what they think are the problems coming up, and you can speak back to them. That just makes it much more accessible and easy. Let's talk a little bit about agentic, because I think that's something which has been a buzzword for the last 12 months or so. What we're seeing within agentic at the moment is that there's now a lot of discussion around the risk and how do you actually mitigate for that risk as well. Now, I know you come from a financial services background, so risk will be something that you'll have thought about a lot, as well as the regulations and the regulators. So as you start to build out this great platform that you mentioned there, with agentic endpoints and with all those, with the workflows that you mentioned, how are you dealing with the inherent risk?
Yeah, no, great point. And actually, that's one of the things I probably did in my earlier waffle when I was going to covering so much areas. I guess from day one, we didn't start out by being a bank. What we wanted to do is we didn't want to build a bank and put AI into it, because I knew that was fundamentally going to have the same challenges that a lot of my peers will have in the space around actually what technology, how the technology differs across those areas of focus. Because ultimately, banking itself, depending on the size and scale of the bank and the global nature of the bank, is extremely complex in terms of the technology that sits behind what you would see as a customer. So if you're someone like an HSBC, a Barclays, a Lloyds, a JP Morgan, etc., the data and the intelligence of your own platforms are extremely complicated. Yeah, they sit on multiple layers of systems, multiple generations of technology, and all of that, when you try to put AI into it to work with your consumer, is a very it's not a simple task. And even if we look at people like Monzo, Starling, Revolut, the more modern banking platforms, all of them are now about 10 years old. Their architecture was built around 12 years old, typically, and they took what was there and they digitalized it for the generation we're in now. What we wanted to do from day one was actually not to necessarily take that and then move it again into another layer of just putting AI into it, but thinking actually, well, what do we need for the next 10 or 15 years? And actually designing a platform which wasn't necessarily an addition to what we have today, but actually was very different. And that for me was key around how the data is stored, because ultimately AI is a data proposition. If you think about it in a way that how we use transformers to predict what comes next. And that for me was, if I was plugging in multiple different data sources, which are often in different languages, often running on different time parameters, that was going to create a situation where my ability to trust it and put from a risk and reputation perspective was going to be high on Beyla. So what we built from day one is actually we're building an AI company and putting financial services into it, rather than building a financial services company and putting AI into it. And that's one of the ways we approach the risk and the agent factor, is that what we're not doing is we're not connecting into multiple different microservices or different historical databases where customer information sits, and trying to pull all that together and out to spit agents that provide those recommendations. So we're creating a data plane which is very much based for agentic services, with the ability then to understand what those agentic services are, categorize and record all of the interactions that take place, and then actually trace back if we're finding scenarios that don't match with our expectations.
Okay, so you're saying that you're building it from the ground up to be an agentic solution, to be a data solution. So you've actually been able to build in the security, the privacy, or the compliance from the get-go, yes, without having to be an MCP server where you're pulling in lots of different things from different other servers, which then that's where a lot of the risk comes from in those.
Yeah, because if we rely on, so we just want to be the orchestration layer in the middle without understanding where that data, how that data is managed, how it sits, how it's updated, and we just pull that in, sort of look at it in that sort of moment and then spit it out. That becomes a very high risk opportunity, and the ability for us to manage and be secure with that is removed, in my opinion. So what we actually want to sort of have that data plane where we're very clearly managing and owning the parameters of how data moves, how we record that data, how it's updated, how agents look at it, and also how agents work with each other. So we call it an agent mesh. And those agents, one agent speaks to another agent, they look at the information, they compare, contrast, and effectively it's not one single sort of skill tool that's usually running the output. So we're able to then understand, okay, well, if there's 5 agents looking at something, we're potentially getting 5 different outcomes. Why is that? How do we start to refine the best outcome? How do we then prune away the bad outcomes? And how do we improve the models to get to a position where we're very confident that the feedback and the advice that Beyla is giving is the most accurate and relevant to the consumer.
Yeah, it's a fascinating world as we start to get into the agentic space of having those multiple agents having their own conversations. Someone was telling me about how they set up their virtual board the other day, not only with the different characters and personality types within their virtual board, but also the chairman who, or the chairperson who then will put in the questions and then summarize everything. So these board meetings happen without the humans actually having to turn up, but then the distilled output comes back. It was fascinating stuff. And I think, in similar way you were explaining there with your different personality types within your system, you're able to ensure that managing the risk, it's bringing in those insights from the collective intelligence that you've built over from the different companies. So one of the challenges around all of this is how reliant companies are upon some basic tech platforms. And you started to mention that you're building out your own platform here. So are you thinking about this from a sovereign capability perspective, both for companies, for individuals, for nation states?
Yeah, we see there's a huge opportunity for the UK to be a major player at a sovereign level in terms of artificial intelligence, and for me that's not necessarily having a UK model. That's around sort of just the UK being recognised as sort of a tier one player. And I think the reality right now is we're not a tier one player. If I like globally, the reality is we've got America with people like OpenAI, Anthropic. There's new models just being released, thinking machines. I think it was launched yesterday in the UK, or it was launched yesterday, and we're seeing that in the UK. But and then you've got China on the other side, and whilst there's I know Mr. Oil is in Europe, but the reality is the trajectory of progress has been made around those core labs. We look at things like DeepMind coming out of the UK, actually probably one of the first AI companies really in the space, was relatively early acquired by Google and assumed into the Google framework. So that ultimately sits as a US tech company now. In some ways, I know that there may be some arguments around that. Is it a UK lab or is it part of Google? But the reality is it sits under the Google framework. So I think if we're looking on a global nature and the opportunity the UK has as a nation and for businesses running in the UK, how do we start to benefit from the next generation of, and this for me is not a generation of technology, but it's really the next industrial revolution of how technology works around. And that's super exciting. People say, oh, we're too late already. The labs already have sort of sold in March and they're already there. We're there actually at the very early stages of artificial intelligence into what it will be. So I think we've got a huge opportunity to really become a major player in terms of how we want to play a role in that, which companies are relevant and continue to be relevant, how funding happens across that, and actually then how data benefits our individual consumer. Because the reality is we're no longer, the world has got smaller in many ways. And from a regulatory point of view or from a governmental point of view, we have lost control of our borders at a technology level because things move around in a very different space to what they did 10 or 20 years ago. So for me, if as a UK business proud to be building here in the UK with UK engineers, if we can build a business model that is focused on how businesses operate, the best of how businesses communicate, how businesses can work in a trusted environment with each other and compound that intelligence over time of interactions, that becomes a really powerful opportunity for UK businesses to be part of. Yeah, because if I'm utilizing that intelligence to run my business, I'm effectively getting back real life examples of what's happened with other businesses that can help me. Not theoretical information that's been scraped from the internet and scraped from different books and articles over time of what could be happening. And that's reality. What a lot of large language models are is theory of what's happened in the past. What we want to build is actually what has happened, what hasn't happened in a sense of the way it was expected. So there's always going to be good and bad outcomes. How we can learn to continually improve and ultimately support that environment within a UK sovereign structure. UK for us is going to be a key part because that's where we're launching. That's where we want to build into. Beyla also will be a global business at some point in time. So it's also how we then would do that in other markets relevant to businesses in Asia Pacific, in North America, etc. I think there's huge opportunities there to look at how the world could be with technology depoliticalized in some ways. Because that's an interesting area that I think we're yet to figure out, because one of the big challenges right now is geopolitics rather, in terms of how exchange control factors feed in, how businesses can operate, because we saw a few weeks ago with the US exchange controls shutting down one of those firms from offering a model that they released. If we don't have that capability ourselves to run tier one models that really add value into the consumers utilizing them, we're at risk of other nations dictating what we can and can't do in terms of our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the main risks, I think, of the geopolitical level, that when we talk about sovereignty, it is about being able to ensure we have continued access to some of those technologies, but also ensure that the data which sits upon some of those technologies can't be requisitioned by states who maybe want to access that data. So there's all these issues here.
Just going back, and also training for the future. If you think about, so I'm a father of 4 boys. So the oldest is 18, the youngest is 3. So what are they going to, what are their careers going to look like over the next 30 years? And for me, having the UK take a lead in building new technologies around with the opportunity of artificial intelligence is really important. So if we create that opportunity for people to build companies here in the UK, grow companies in the UK, and we put our future minds into that, that's a huge opportunity for us as a nation.
Well, yeah, and this is an area where the UK has always led, right? I mean, the UK arguably invented modern finance. I mean, there was some in Antwerp and other places, but really it was the City of London where you saw this phenomenal growth in the setting of standards, the setting of regulations. And the reason they were doing that wasn't to make it burdensome for businesses to operate. It was because they wanted to ensure the quality and they wanted to ensure trust. I think we're at that same sort of inflection point now with this new technology where trust is really important. So that's why we need to sort of create these rules. But the UK is a really important space for that to happen. And I think I was at an event hearing Nick from Revolut speak about their growth. It felt like they very much rode the wave of the mobile app sort of revolution. They're still, 12 years, it's a relatively early journey. And he was talking about, how 12 years ago their app looked horrible and now they're sort of launching around the world. I wonder whether, your opportunity here is to get on and use the agentic growth and that collective intelligence that you're mentioning there, and see that international growth based upon the UK's global reputation and the trust we have internationally, and get there even quicker.
Yeah, I fully agree, and that's very much we see two factors there that we think differentiates what the next phase will be. One is agentic, and the power of agentic. It means lots of different things to different people, but that sort of ability to have intelligence working with you. And the second part is around the form factor. So the last generation has been around apps primarily, apps and sort of software as a service. Primarily what we see is around communication. The way I look at it, we're trying to build a lot of some neuropsychology into Beyla because we're all humans, and the way humans work with each other has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years effectively. And we've not been evolved to type into little boxes and receive back text in small boxes as well that tell us all this information. We've evolved by talking with each other, by looking at each other, having body language understanding, getting trust around who we work with as part of groups. And that to me is, how do we utilize that as part of what this next generation is? And that for me is around, well, AI isn't a person. We don't need to necessarily create physical robots that look like humans. What we can do is we can create digital humans that effectively feel more human. And there are some interesting parameters around this, but effectively for me, trust often is in terms of how do I, if I'm working with a system, and that's either the traditional sort of through pressing buttons and typing in, or if I'm working in the new way we speak to it and we have a call with it, it's around what's it doing for me and how's it helping me and how's it understanding me as Daniel, and sort of having that ability to customize its approach for me. And that's, I think, will be the next we see phase of opportunity there around creating an ability that works for Tim or works for any of your listeners, because the reality is we're all individuals and we all work differently with each other, and we all have different approaches that need to be understood. And that's always been hard if you're building a product which is a sort of, it does what it says on the box and it's the same for everybody. I don't think we need to build those traditional products anymore, because through the technology we have today, we can allow that technology to be customized in a way which is helpful. Now, there is the danger that some companies may be utilizing that technology poorly or to benefit their own objectives rather than the customer's objectives. And that's an area we want to be very clear around. And that goes back to trust and reputation and potentially regulation. Yeah, I don't want to be using, it would be possible for me to utilize Beyla's intelligence to convince people to buy services. Yeah. through large language models are very good at understanding personas and perspectives and sort of speaking in a way that is convincing. I'm very clear. I don't want to be selling products. I want to be creating solutions that help our business owners and our customers really sort of move themselves forward. And that's a key area that I've been passionate about from day one. Now, that's quite a hard thing to regulate. And if we see currently with some of the big global tech companies, there are some firms on the, let's say, the media side that may be not as good at protecting their users as they could be. And that's, these are public companies. Once we get into the bad actor states, or we get into the criminals using AI to actively harm, that becomes another layer on top of that as well. And for me, the reality is that the way human nature has always been, we're quite an aggressive species, and we'll probably always be fighting and bickering within ourselves. So I don't think we can stop those bad actors out there at any level which is realistic. But what we can use AI to do is protect ourselves from that. You know, so how can we be having the smartest, the fastest, the most effective AI, which helps our nations, our good actors to benefit from it, and then really to minimize those bad actors and those people that do want to do harm to us through whatever reason. And that's, I think, the area that we need to focus on.
Yeah. So I agree with you on the part around the amazing ability of AI-powered services to deliver customized, curated, conversational interaction. I think that is the future. I think that's a very smart play to focus on that space. It's this sort of bespoke understanding of your customer, which I think we're going to see more and more of. And you know, you've got that there within the some financial services side. I disagree that we can't do anything about the bad actors. I think, you know, in order to build that trust, we as an industry need to come together and actually sort of address some of those bad actors. We need to call it out, and we need to be setting standards. So we could do it in a more kind of positive way. But I think, you know, that is something that we need to and can do.
And just to clarify that it wasn't that the challenge is regulation won't stop that. Yeah, so regulation only affects the good actors because they're the ones that care about the regulation and sort of follow it. The bad actors, so it could be nation states, it could be terrorist organizations, it could be just sort of unstable individuals. They're the people that don't care what the regulations say, but potentially do have access to AI. And that's always that challenge we're going to have because it's a technology which is relatively easily available. It makes it quite difficult to control it. And it's how do we do that? Things like nuclear weapons are quite hard to get hold of. So that, in a sense, is a different challenge to that we have with something physical, because the reality AI isn't physical.
I see. Yeah, and this is the crux of, you know, probably a whole nother podcast we could do around this, of the ethics of how much we can actually control AI and the sort of existential risks which are inherent there. There's lots we could go into there, but we're going to have to start to wrap things up. In terms of looking to the future, what can we do to find out more about Beyla? What have you got coming up?
Yeah, a lot of exciting things come up. So we're currently launched our beta plan with customers actively testing the agentic capabilities of Beyla. So our website is quite simple, beyla.ai. So that's BEYLA.ai. And that's where you can find the latest updates on what we're doing. We've got some interesting partnerships we've just agreed, so they'll start to come out in the second half of the year. And we continue to work to be in a position to launch our financial services capability, which we're on an EMI path, so electronic money institution path, hopefully towards the end of this year or early into next year. So that's working with the UK regulator to ensure that we have all the right permissions in place to offer the physical movement of money through agent services. And that's where we're really excited around that. And that's an area that the FCA in our case has been really supportive on, helping us to explore what's possible and supporting us in this journey to move finance into the UK being a big part of the future of finance.
That's great to hear there's that support and there is that sort of ambition at this sort of central institutional level as well, because it is such an area where the UK does lead. So it makes sense that they've been doubling down on that. I'd love to keep in touch and find out more about that.
Always happy to. Into the, like I say, LinkedIn for us. We're not quite so active on X. but we do have a profile on X. So if any X users are on there, please do reach out to us. And yeah, we're looking forward to really understanding how can we help SMEs. So if SMEs are out there, have a problem, aren't finding solutions in the market today that they would like to see, then come talk to us. And we're very open to learn how we can adapt Beyla to be the most effective platform to help UK businesses grow and support their aspiration.
That's great. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us not just about Beyla, but about your view for the future of financial services for SMEs and how this collective intelligence can really empower those businesses to learn from that hive mind of financial knowledge. And it really does sound like it empowers the founders, the leaders there who don't have the time to always understand these really critical dynamics within their business. But you're able to bring that in a way which makes it a lot more easier, a lot more accessible. It's customized to their business. And I think we touched upon a lot of the real potential there in the future around agentic and how that's going to supercharge many different industries, but you really brought it to life within financial services and how you're pioneering. So best of luck with the growth of Beyla, and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.